Clemson doctoral student and teacher Mr. A.D. Carson begins by describing his knowledge of Benjamin Tillman. He encourages us to educate ourselves on the man Tillman Hall was named after, and only then decide a stance regarding the renaming of the building.
His prominence in politics, he was also one of the leaders of the militia, terrorist organization called the Red Shirts, terrorized particularly African American groups. There's a guy by the name of Simon Coker who infamously was murdered after asking if he could say a last prayer before they killed him. And Benjamin Tillman is reported to have said that he was taking too long and killed him while he was in prayer. And his career as a person who was engaging in racial terror is actually what led to his political prominence, which, sort of directly leads to his name being on the most prominent building on Clemson's campus. His insistence in using lynch law or in the fact that he actually engaged in those kinds of things led to people supporting him, rallying behind him. We have a building on campus named after him, but that's not named after him in spite of that. I think it's named after him because of that. When we follow the progression of events, his political career is connected to his career as a domestic terrorist, and if we honor him because of that political career, then we're honoring him because of what got him into that political career. I think that if you provide people accurate information about who Benjamin Tillman is and the reasons why his name exists on the building and the history about the naming of the building itself, then the student body would probably make that decision with no qualms whatsoever. But I think that when we make those kinds of decisions absent of historical context and engaging in the events that lead up to it, then we find ourselves in places where we say that Tillman's name being on that building is about heritage and about history without knowing what that heritage and that history is. When we don't know that, then we can very easily align ourselves with that name. But when we align ourselves with that name, then we align ourselves with that history and those actions. And I don't think any Clemson student, any Clemson alum would want to be associated with what Benjamin Tillman stood for and what he continues to stand for now. If you Google Benjamin Tillman, particularly if you go to the Wikipedia page for lynching, Benjamin Tillman is the pull quote. I can't imagine anybody who's affiliated with Clemson wanting to be affiliated with the person who is almost literally the poster child for lynching in America. I feel strongly about historical context and understanding what it is that we're doing when we do that. So I feel like we should teach people who he is and why his name is on the building. And then I feel like if we decide after knowing that the name, the collective we, if we decide after knowing that his name should remain on the building, then fine. I think that we might also think about then adding some context so that whenever people go into that building or they're looking at that building or they show it on ESPN, we also know who he is and why he's honored. But again, I don't believe that we would bestow that honor if we collectively had an understanding of who he is. Renaming is not a thing that I'm so concerned with. I think that we would probably just not do it. We wouldn't have the name if we knew better. Yeah. And that was what the Reclaim Old Name campaign was really kind of about, saying that it's not if we were so concerned about historical memory, then we would call it what it was originally called. So Old Main is the default. I think that would be the thing. If we say that we honor legacy, then we would honor the Clemson legacy by calling it what it was originally called. And I think that there are better ways that we can acknowledge who he is. It's not a forgetting of history if his name is not on that building. You could make a study room in the library and name it after Benjamin Tillman, and then have resources so you can study who he is and what he did that was positive for Clemson and all of the things that he did that were terrible in the world. And I think that that's a significant way to acknowledge what he's done here, as well as to not disrespect the legacy of the people who were negatively affected by how he was in the world. But I think that it comes across to people as an honor when a person's name is on a building. It's a stain on all of our history. It's not just the people who were killed, but what about Simon Coker? What about his family? What about the fact that when the 9 people were killed at the Emmanuel AME church, that Clemson decided, as a way to honor those people, to put those 9 wreaths outside, like out there on the military plaza. And then they took a picture and they framed it with the Tillman, the building named for Tillman, behind it. So what is the irony of having a state senator killed by a white supremacist, and then honoring the legacy of the state senator and the 8 other people who were killed by framing a picture with a building that is named for a white supremacist who killed a state senator? And if we don't know that, then we can take that picture and feel like we're doing something really responsible and be doing something that's like actually pretty horrible, which is what we did.
Unlike Mr. Carson's emphasis on education, Mrs. Porter believes that we should revisit the naming of Tillman Hall, while realizing that the viewpoints on what was considered acceptable for some have drastically changed since the 19th century.
My name is Ginny Porter, and I work with student athletes as an academic advisor. I've been doing this job since 1991, and before that I was an instructor in the English department.
He is a colorful character. Let's see, he was a governor of South Carolina. He was also one of the original trustees of the university and helped the legislature pass what it needed to do to take the legacy of the will and turn it into a land-grant institution. He's unsavory in his politics and expression of them. He has very important historical legacy in terms of bringing Clemson into being, but he also had demonstrated in his career that he was maybe out of alignment with some of the vision and values, I think, that we held then and we hold now. The attention was more on, he's sort of a founding father of Clemson, and not really looking at the pieces of some of his behaviors and beliefs that now we find really unacceptable. So there was not that cultural awareness maybe given at that time and when the building was named, that I think it would be a very different situation now than Correct. It was then. I don't know if you can always go back and deconstruct and then reconstruct history like that. And what we perceive now as unacceptable was not necessarily the case then. I would be in favor of changing it to Old Main, but I'm not in favor of just dismissing or imposing a 21st century point of view on something in the 19th century and condemning it. It almost needs to be a majority vote. Why not have the people that it affects help make that decision? But I would be in favor of changing it. I mean, it was a modern decision. It was a 20th century decision that maybe needs to be revisited.